Hey, Industrial Talk is brought to you by Cap Logistics. You want to minimize downtime? Absolutely. Increase reliability? You bet. Ensure operational profitability? Yes, you do. That means you need 24/7, 365 insights into your supply chain. Look no further. Cap Logistics. Go to caplogistics.com or just call them. They're great people. 800-227-2471.
Welcome to the Industrial Talk Podcast with Scott MacKenzie. Scott is a passionate industry professional dedicated to transferring cutting-edge, industry-focused innovations and trends while highlighting the men and women who keep the world moving. So put on your hard hat, grab your work boots, and let's go.
All right, once again, thank you very much for joining Industrial Talk, and thank you for your continued support of this wonderful platform that celebrates you, industry professionals. You are the story. You are bold, brave, you dare greatly, you innovate, you collaborate, you solve today's problems, and you are at the tip of the sword at making things better. Yeah, that's what you are. We have a great conversation. Energy as a service, which is, every time I have conversations, I am always dazzled by the creativity, the innovation that exists. Energy as a service. We're talking to Alex Flournoy, and it's with Baseline Energy Services. They're out of Denver, Colorado, and it's a great conversation. Let's get cracking. Let's stop delaying. Let's get rolling. Yeah. Again, if you're in industry, you're listening to this, you're thinking about getting into industry, definitely. It is an exciting time. It's a renaissance. I think we're just scratching the surface of just fabulous innovations that are happening today. And I mean, if there's one sector, one industry that's getting impacted quite a bit, that's energy. Creative ways of being able to deliver energy, it's happening all over the place. By the way, I'm going to be at Distributech as well as PowerGen. So if you are planning to go to those events, Distributech, and they're both in Dallas, and PowerGen, look me up. We'll be broadcasting on site. Tell your story. Amplify your message. That's what I'm talking about. Do it. Do it. All right. A bit of business that we're going to cover right now. And I'm serious about this. Industry is so important. It's important to me. I think it's absolutely vital to the world. And when I say industry, it's macro, but it does in manufacturing, oil and gas, mining, and so on and so forth. But I just say industry. It's so important that Industrial Talk is a platform for you. It is like the Spotify of industry, to be able to amplify your message, to get that message out. If you're not doing podcasting, if you're not actively engaged in doing that, I think you're missing out. I think you're missing out on opportunities to be able to tell your story, to be able to help your client base tell their story as well. But the reality is that you need to do that, and it's easier than it's ever been. I mean, there's some things that you got to do and all that good stuff, and then there's some demands that are being placed on you that you got to be able to. But it's a content creating machine, and my position has always been: there's marketing, and then there's attention. I'm always going to lean toward the attention, and people, and it's sort of, it's subtle, but if they know that you exist, there's the attention, there it is. I mean, they feel more comfortable. They can find you out there on the World Wide Web. So I'm very bullish on being able to get your message out. Back to the Spotify analogy. So here's Industrial Talk. If I go out to these podcast type of players, I have a hard time finding industrial-related conversations, content, insights, just because it's busy out there. It's very noisy. There's a lot going on. Industrial Talk is specific to industry. You have a podcast, you have technology, You just want to tell your story. That's what Industrial Talk is here for you. It's for you to be able to do that, to amplify, to create opportunities where maybe if nobody has seen you, don't know that you exist. So this is what Industrial Talk is. It's a platform for industrial juggernauts such as yourself. So, go out to Industrial Talk. You have a podcast, you have technology, you want to amplify your message, just reach out to me. Have a conversation, and definitely let's chirp about ways of being able to help you succeed. That is important. That's number one, numero uno. So it's easy. industrialtalk.com and make it happen. On to the conversation. Baseline Energy Services, Alex Flournoy. This is, once again, Flournoy. Sorry, I didn't finish up this last name because I was excited about energy as a service. Incredible solution. Must listen to. And by the way, last but not least, you're at Distributech, look me up. If you're planning to go to PowerGen, look me up. You can find all the information that you need out on Industrial Talk because it's there. Because I want to meet you. All right, on with the conversation. Here's Alex. Alex, welcome to Industrial Talk. How are you doing today?
Doing very well. Thanks for having me, Scott.
Snowing in Denver? Snowing all around Colorado?
It is big snow. Kind of set your clock by it on Halloween, but now we're getting a foot or two today. So here's our real introduction to winter.
Yeah, listeners, I was commiserating because my air conditioner is running here right outside of New Orleans, and I'm ready for something other than summer. I'm ready, and I'm ready to get a break in my electric bill too. That's what I want more than anything. All right, before we get going, for the listeners out there, Alex, give us a little background, a little 411 on who Alex is.
Yeah, so I grew up Shreveport, Louisiana. Went to school at LSU down in Baton Rouge. Studied petroleum engineering. Spent a year over in East Texas in natural gas compression right out of school. Moved up to Calgary, Canada. Spent 3 years up there doing natural gas compression as well. Always wanted to be in Denver. Moved to Denver in 2014. Did 4 more years in compression here, and then decided to make the move over to power generation with Baseline September of 2018. So for the last 6 years or so, I have been building the Northern Business Unit for the Rockies, doing natural gas power generation for oil field services. And that's where we're at today.
Yeah, for just the listener out there, you spoke on compression, natural. What did that entail, just sort of in general?
From the first part, I was doing more well optimization, lowering the pressure of the well to help it flow more oil and gas to help older wells. I then transitioned to larger compression where we were doing gas lift, where we were injecting the high pressure gas down the well to help increase the production, kind of a artificial lift method. And then I moved more into larger compression from there on the midstream side with gas processing plants and midstream, pushing gas around the country through pipelines and to the gas processing facility. So those are the 3 facets of the compression business that I was involved in.
It's an interesting observation or a change, but now you're in power generation, but you're using natural gas, right?
Yeah, it was a pretty easy transition. The engines that run compressors, the engines that run generators on natural gas are very similar. We just spin the crankshaft now to spin a large alternator to generate electricity as opposed to moving pistons to compress gas. So the same folks in the rotating equipment side of the oil and gas business are both on the compressor and the generator side. So most of my contacts carried over pretty similarly, and the same people making decisions on where they needed to go, when they need them, how to size them. It was a pretty natural shift over. Just had to learn the electrical side of the business from the compressed gas side.
Take us through that. Looking at your form, you indicated specifically about power as a service or generation. What does that mean? Explain to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so at Baseline Energy, we own about 1,200 portable trailer-mounted generators ranging in size from 50 kilowatts up to 350 kilowatts. And we don't charge dollars per kilowatt hour like a typical utility company was based on your usage. We rent the generator to the company that's renting it from us for a monthly service fee. And that fee, whether they use 20% of the load or 80 or 90% of the load, whether they're using it day in, day out, or whether they turn it on and off, they pay one fee for the month. And then that includes all their service, all their parts, all the maintenance. and everything like that, so that it's easy to budget and forecast for them. It's not going to be variable like it would be on a typical utility bill at your house. And that's why it's energy as a service, where they tell us what they need and we handle everything else. Kind of one-stop shop, make it easy on the customer, because they usually are more focused on making oil and gas than they are on making electricity.
So it's incentivized for them if it's a flat rate, a monthly flat rate, and I don't have to. My core business is optimizing the production of oil. All I have to do is just try to get the most out of that power as a service, right? That would be my motivation, is trying to keep cranking it. It just makes sense, right?
Yeah, for them, they sometimes will oversize the generators a little bit more than they need just to ensure that they have enough. The cost of the generator is very minimal compared to the value of the product that they're creating. And so we want to size it as properly as possible, so they're not having excess power that they could be using that they're not and paying for. So we'll monitor that, with our telemetry and be able to look at the end of the month where their max loads and their average loads were. And if we need to bring something bigger or something smaller in, there's no charge for changing out that equipment for a bigger or smaller. So we can continuously optimize if they add equipment, remove equipment, slow things down, speed things up, that kind of thing.
Take us through a use case. Explain to the listener just a little bit about what this looks like.
Yeah, predominantly back in 2012 when Baseline was founded, other companies were getting into it on the power gen side. Natural gas engines had been used for compression for quite some time, but the technology was getting better and better. We do a lot of powering of production and facilities. So after the well has been drilled, after the well has been completed or fracked, and you're producing the facility or producing the pad, there's going to be some level of electric motors needed on site, whether that's for your pumping unit, for your ESP, your electric submersible pump, your electric compressors, your blowers for your fans and for your flares, just general transfer pumps. So the majority of what we do is anytime that there is an electric motor as opposed to a gas engine on that oil field site that needs electricity, and they do not have access to the power grid to be able to run that electric motor, we take the natural gas directly from the wells on the pad. They go through the separation process, but pretty minimal. And then we take that raw natural gas directly from the well, run it into the engine, create the horsepower, spin the crankshaft, create the electricity, and then distribute that to those electric motors on site. So in essence, we are just kind of an on-site power generation facility, whether that's very small or very large. And in many cases nowadays, they're drilling more and more wells on each pad. And so they may need more than the 350 kilowatts that our largest unit can put out. And therefore, we can actually sync multiple units together in what they call paralleling to share the load for larger uses. And we've done anywhere from that 50 kilowatt range up to the 8 to 10 megawatt range, so 8,000 to 10,000 kilowatts. And so our business is really just determining what the customer's need is, how much fuel they're going to need to make that power, how much power they need for what they're going to be powering, and then sync it all up together and make it happen for them so that they have what they need when they need it.
So I have a well outside. It's standalone. I'm meeting your definition of why I need your solution. But because it's remote, I don't have people out there. I have a well, right? How does your solution meet the demand? How does that work? How do you keep that in sync?
So our customers, we have service locations throughout most of the major oil and gas basins through Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Colorado, Wyoming, and Utah, and in New Mexico. We're not really going to take on a project that's too far away from where our hubs are, as it is rotating equipment and it will need to be maintained every 30 to 45 days through preventative maintenance, just like kind of changing the oil on your car. And then there can be breakdowns on the unit just from the consistent use and needing to have somebody close to fix it. But there doesn't need to be anybody there to be able to function properly. Once we're there, we've hooked up, everything is set properly. Just like a power plant doesn't necessarily need to have somebody watching it all the time to make sure you've got what you need. Once we've set it up, we can remotely monitor our operations, our temperatures, our pressures, our voltages. And if we notice something getting out of whack, we can go ahead and proactively get out there. Or if something happens that we weren't able to catch, we still can get out there. We've got somebody on call 24 hours a day, every day of the year, to try to be at every location that needs our assistance in less than 2 hours from the time that it's going to go down. And therefore, you don't really need to have anybody out there. And most of our stuff is remote. The closer you are to civilization, the more likelihood you're going to have access to a power grid. And the farther out you are, the less likely you are.
Yeah.
So our business thrives in areas that are very remote and do not have a lot of development near them.
How do you deal with the telemetry? If you're saying I'm monitoring this asset as real time as possible, how are you dealing with that?
We've got a control room at our headquarters in Fort Worth, Texas, that's manned 24 hours a day. It's just a device that operates off of cellular data that is constantly monitoring all of the different parameters, and it's polling the data, every couple of seconds, so that we can trend what that looks like. So if we start to see, for instance, voltage starting to drop slowly, we may know that the battery is starting to go bad. Whereas if we see the voltage drop to zero we may know that a belt broke on the alternator, or vice versa, something like that. But we have a team that looks at that. We've got a 1-833 number that our customers can call 24 hours a day. And then we use that telemetry data to be able to know which type of technician to send, what type of parts to be bringing with them. And that's for the maintenance side of it. But it's more so for the optimization side of the power use, to make sure that the customers are using the right size unit day in and day out. There can be lots of fluctuations, different sites, from their peak loads to their base loads to their average loads. And we just want to make sure that we're able to look back at that, trend that data over the last 2 weeks, several months, and make sure that they've got the right equipment out there.
How do you cycle that asset? How do you know that I have in my mind a base load type of, it's spinning, it's delivering power there, and then you're pulling off the telemetry. How does that system cycle and deal with peak, base, whatever how do they do that?
Well, the generator itself is going to give up as much power as needed, as demanded from the electric motors on site. And so whether it's commanding 30 kilowatts, whether it's commanding 2 megawatts from the system, the generator will give up what it needs to give up. There's also set points. If it's going to exceed what's the working limit, it will shut down on a high shutdown. But when we're looking at peak loads versus average loads, when you start up a motor for the first time, depending on if you have a VFD, a variable frequency drive, or a soft start, as opposed to a traditional old school kind of hard start, you can require more amps and more power to get that engine spinning at the start. If that's the case, you may need to oversize your generators for that peak load to get it started. And then your generators are running at a lower load traditionally. Most everything has gone to a variable frequency drive, variable speed drive, or a soft start, so that we're not having a bunch of excess power just to get the motor spinning before we kind of transition into the actual function of the project. But peak loads versus average loads, if we can't handle the peak load, then we can't get it started, and we can't do it when they really need it. So most of our sizing is based on the peak load, and then the average loads is just another good talking point for us and the customer to say, hey, here's where your average is. You may only be averaging 50, but you need 120 kilowatts at certain points throughout the day. If it's a pump that gets sped up and slowed down, the faster you run your pumps, the more power they draw, and the slower you run them, the less. And so everything has a reason behind it, and it's all a cause and effect. And we can just use the data to make sure that what they're doing in their operations is syncing up with what our telemetry is telling us. And if it's not, then at least we have a place to look, and it's not just based on opinion; it's based on fact.
When you start to receive the telemetry, and you're starting to look at these assets, and you're finding that maybe some of the assets are having some challenges, whatever it might be, your technician always out in the field, always roaming around. How do you coordinate your technician to be able to go search that?
Yeah, so usually what we do is we have roughly 20 to 25 generators per technician as their assigned area, as their assigned business unit. And then they'll typically work during the day from more like 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. over that 12-hour shift where they're available. And then we'll have a technician on call, or a specified night technician that takes over after the day shift. And then we also have telemetry on the trucks of our technicians that are out there. So we've got a field service manager and an operations manager and an operations director over each region, who, when they get that telemetry coming in, the control room knows whose set of units that may be if it's during the day, and they simply call that technician and say, hey, this alert came in. I need you to go over to this site for this customer. If it's in the evening, they look and see who's on call or who the night technician is and do the same process. And if somebody's busy, they can also look at where the trucks are on the map and find the next best guy who's closest and then dispatch them to that location. So we don't want people driving from, 2 hours across the field when there's somebody 20 minutes next door. And so we use the telemetry of our trucks just the same way we use the telemetry of our generators, all thinking, how can we be more efficient, more effective, and respond quicker?
Yeah, the proximities is pretty interesting. Where do you see it going? I mean, is it expanding? What's on the horizon for Baseline Energy Services? What's being discussed?
Yeah, both Baseline Energy and all the people that are our competitors or I would say in our same business. The world needs more electricity now than it ever has. And as you've been talking about on your Industrial Talk podcast about power generation and about electrical power in general, the use case for electricity, replacing gas and diesel engines with electric motors, not just in the oil field, but for data centers, for commercial and industrial, for all these different things that we read about headlines in the news every day. Now that we all have a phone and a computer, we've had these for years, but there's still more and more power being used and being needed. In the oil field in particular, in our sector, electric submersible pumps, particularly in like the Delaware and Permian Basin out in West Texas and New Mexico, as well as in South Texas and in Oklahoma, where they have more liquid than they have gas coming out of these wells. The preferred production method is becoming electric submersible pump, which requires a lot of electricity by nature. They have a large electric motor on them. Traditional pumping units that go up and down that you see from, on the top of the surface of the land, you typically aren't going to have that big of a motor, and they used to run off of gas engines, but a lot of those are controlled more tightly with an electric motor and have more, they're more efficient. And so everything with an electric motor and a panel and telemetry and all the things you can look at and trend from the electric standpoint just kind of brings us into the 21st century, and people are continuing to upgrade and need more electricity. So Baseline has grown from when we had 12 or 15 units in 2012-13 to 1,200 units today. And we see ourselves, needing to build hundreds more a year to keep up with demand. We've got more demand than we have supply. And that's kind of the general sentiment across the industry is this line is up and to the right if you're looking at a graph on demand.
Yeah.
And as that takes place, we want to be able to be there to bridge that gap. Some of our projects are kind of, long-term, 5, 10, 15 years where we are the power source, where other times they may have the grid and the utility company 6 months out, a year out, they're going to have the power built there, but they still need to go ahead and get started. So we have a lot of times where we bridge that gap of time until they have access to the grid. In other cases, it may cost millions and millions of dollars to run that power line from the utility company and the power plant to your site. And you could rent a lot of generators for that cost over a long period of time. And so why would you do it? Yeah. So there's a lot of different reasons driving what we do.
But it's going up, like you said. The demand is there, and it's going to continue to grow. It appears. You don't manufacture your generation solutions, do you?
For years, we did not. We purchased from a couple of different manufacturers, but last year we got into the manufacturing business. We built our first 15 during 2024. And anything that we buy or build for 2025, which could be as many as 100 or more units, are likely going to be built in-house by us. Now, granted, we are purchasing the engines, purchasing the generators and the buildings and the trailers, packaging them all together. So we're not building the engine or building the generator, but in most of the manufacturing world related to compression and to power generation, they call it packaging the unit, where you're taking the different components, putting them together. And that way we have a little more control over our style to differentiate us, as well as our lead times and production schedule. We're no longer at the mercy of somebody else building them for us. And so that's going to be a big transition after 11, 12 years of purchasing prepackaged stuff and now packaging it ourselves.
That's a good strategy. I like that.
Yeah.
So if somebody's listening to this podcast right now and they're saying, I want to talk to Alex, what would be the best way for me to get a contact with Alex?
I'm very active on LinkedIn. It's under my name, Alex Flournoy. My email address is my first initial last name at baseline-enserv, short for energyservices.com.
Yeah.
Phone number is 720-778-7135. I am the director of business development. I sit in Denver, Colorado, but I manage all of our sales areas across the company. Our website also, which will be shared on here, has access where you can put in a customer form request, which will come directly to me. You can put in your information, but very easy to get in touch with us. Very easy for us to take your concept or your idea, or your need, let you know what you need pretty quickly, and then continue the discussions from there.
Love it. Alex, you were wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for being on Industrial Talk. All right, listeners, we're going to have all the contact information for Alex, so fear not, reach out to him. Great conversation to have. All right, we're going to wrap it up on the other side. Stay tuned. We will be right back.
You're listening to the Industrial Talk Podcast Network.
Cool conversation. I can always geek out on anything that's power, utilities, energy. I love it all because it's such an important component to what we do in industry. You got to reach out to Alex. Yep, Baseline Energy Services. As he said, as he was closing out, there's many avenues to be able to get a hold of this gent because he's worth it. And he's got some great insights, and they're doing some wonderful things at Baseline. So that's it. That's everything. All right. I'm going to be at Distributech. I'm going to be at PowerGen. You need to be putting that on your calendar. If you're not there, well, I'm sorry. But if you are there, look me up. I've got a booth. I'll share it later. I think it's out on Industrial Talk. But nonetheless, we want to hear your story. We want to meet you. It is an important event. So put that on your calendar. If you have not, look into it. It's all out there on Industrial Talk. Be bold, be brave, dare greatly. I say it all the time. Hang out with Alex. Change the world. We're going to have another great conversation shortly, so stay tuned.